all, as I begin recording, about note-taking for reading. A couple of you gave me your class notes. Reading notes are different. Reading notes are from your textbook. Even though they may often cover the same subjects, there's different information in there. I know what my class notes look like because they're mine. They're from my head. As you will see when we come back in person at some point, I don't use notes in class. I know this stuff really well. I know where I'm going. On occasion, I might look at something to make sure I don't forget to talk about it, but I know what I'm doing. So when I read my notes that I gave you, I know what those are. And I know they didn't come from your brain and your understanding of the textbook. So I need reading notes that are separate and different than your class notes. If you would like to have them both in the same notebook or the both same type document, that's fine, but you need to label them as such so you know and I know the differences between. And Orcon, you came in late again, man. That's a bad habit. So I need you here on time, please. It's only one of you, so I'm not going to beat y'all up for 10 minutes, but fifth period got a 10-minute lecture because I had 6 kids come in late. I would rather you give me the middle finger. Now, I don't recommend this because it won't go well. I would rather get a middle finger from a kid than a kid be late. Because I can fix the middle finger. That won't happen twice, I promise you. I can't fix you being late. That's on you. And it's a really bad habit, and it needs to change, period. Because it drives me nuts. No tolerance for it whatsoever. Well, I was having technical difficulties. Then log on 3 minutes earlier. And y'all are doing a great job. You're probably the best of my 3 AP World classes of being here on time collectively. So I appreciate that. But one is still one too many. So fix that and don't do it again. Log on 3 minutes earlier. It's not hard. Okay. Now, as I was saying, those notes should be your attempt to explain what you're reading. I don't care what format they're in. I don't really even care how long they are. Obviously, there's a right balance. It's a Goldilocks situation of just enough, and you might have to experiment to figure that out. The only kind of notes I do not like are a list of nouns, and I only had 1 or 2 kids that did that, where they just wrote a bunch of names or a bunch of words with no explanation. Those aren't notes. That's I'm in a hurry and I'm scribbling stuff down. Notes should help you learn and study in the future because you're going to forget some of this stuff over the next couple months, and you're going to be responsible for it. So when you come back to this in March and April, your notes will help you do that. So overall, I thought your all's notes were pretty good. The paragraph above the schedule, both in period 0 and period 1 schedule, says that you should label your notes daily by page number or date. If you did not do that, I took away a point. That is for you to know where things are, and it is for me to know where things are. So daily labels are required. That says that in the paragraph. Beyond that, I don't care what format you take, how you write them, if you type them or handwrite them, if you color code them, like all that's fine. I don't care. But that's my expectation. And if you have those notes, you'll get a 5. And by the end of the year, your notes will be more sufficient and organized and help you study better. And most of you will probably write less by the end of the year than you do now. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Okay? So that's my expectation on notes. You should be getting a 5 on them. And I don't know if you read the explanation on the handout. You should probably do that. There are minimum requirements for note grades. If you do not get those note grades, the next unit you have to do a reading quiz every day as punishment. So when we come back in person, we will do typically 2 reading quizzes a week out of 5 days. That's pretty standard. So if we get to Friday and you haven't had a second reading quiz, you know you're going to have one when you walk in class that day. It's just to be expected. You, as a student who had not met the minimum note grade requirement, would have one every day. We would start class without you and you would have a quiz, and that's with no notes. When we come back in person, no notes for our reading quizzes. Nope. So those of you that get in that situation are probably going to see your grade drop. So I would encourage you to take notes every day. I know your assignments are due every 2, 3, or 4 days, depending on the calendar, but I would divide it up and read something every day. The longer you put it off, the more there is to do, the less you will learn from it, the harder it will be. So a huge part of this is discipline. I cannot imagine. I know it's hard for me as an adult. I know this is really hard on you all. But I also know you have more free time than you normally would during a typical school day. And if it were me, what I have done the last couple months to keep what little sanity I have is to stay busy. I start to dwell on negative thoughts and other things when I'm less busy. So I have made myself incredibly busy, which is normally my pattern anyway. So doing your homework gives you things to do, which keeps you from sitting there going, ugh, which I totally get why you want to feel that way. So my encouragement would be to try to keep up with it, because here's what happens. And then we're going to move on from notes. You're never going to catch up. I have kids look me in the eye every year. Mr. Rich, I'm going to catch up on my notes over Thanksgiving. No, you're not. Over the holidays, I'm going to catch up on my notes. No. And my all-time favorite, I'm going to catch up over spring break. No, you're not. You're not. So keep up with it so you don't have to catch up. And when we do come back, whenever that may be, instead of having 10 or 12 pages every 3 days, it's going to be 4 pages a day. And I will assign it daily. So you can read 4 pages of this textbook, and usually it's about 2.5 because there's a map, there's a picture. You can read this textbook in 4 pages in 15 minutes. You really can, if you'll do it. But some of you don't. So that's my encouragement. If you do the reading, it's going to help you. I used to have my kids at the end of every school year fill out surveys. Like, what's your advice for kids next year? I stopped doing the surveys because it was always the same. I got 2 answers. Do what Mr. Rich tells you. And I'm not kidding. That's what they would say, some version of that. And the number 1 answer I got every year for advice for next year's students, read. Read. If you read, you're going to be in good shape. If you don't, anybody's guess. You might be fine, you might not. Just depends on what the essays are, the short answers, and I don't know what that's going to be, and neither do you. So if you read, you're in good shape. If you don't, you're not. It's real simple. So keep doing it, stay with it. Most of your all's notes were very, very good, and I was very pleased with them. If you're struggling, keep up with it. Also, I put the note grade in mastery. It probably doesn't belong in mastery, but I'm trying to help you out because most of you get good grades on your notes. However, if you have a bad grade on your notes, that's going to really hurt you. So please make sure they are complete and you're following the directions I've given you. So label them daily with page number or date. Questions? All right, let's talk about reading quiz number 3. I have right here a sample student answer for that quiz. I posted it in Stream literally when class started, like at 9:59. So if you would like to pull it up, feel free. Now, some of you may look at this sample, and I promise you I did not edit a letter. So there's some misspelled words. There's a comma in the wrong place here. It's fine. That's not the point. Some of you may look at this and go, I did better than that. Why didn't he pick mine? And you know what? You're probably not wrong. This is a 2 out of 2. It's a decently solid 2 out of 2. This is not wonderful. This is not great. If I was grading this out of 5 instead of 2, it'd probably get a 3.5 or a 4. But they did what they needed to do. And plus, I want to give students that are struggling with this an example that is doable. This is doable. This is not, oh my gosh, this is the kid I've gone to school with since 4th grade who always does well in social studies and blah, blah, blah. This is doable. 2 things to remember for every quiz. First of all, look how long it is. There are paragraphs. The first one's a little shorter, but they're paragraphs. This is not 1 sentence. 1 sentence won't work. Ever. We'll say that one more time for fun. 1 sentence won't work on these answers ever. Don't give me 1 sentence. You need to be specific. You need to say how or why. So if you pull up your textbook, I knew I had my copy somewhere. Here it is. This was pages 63 to 77. If you don't need this, just bear with us for about 4 minutes. Page 63, there was a blue headline at the beginning of your reading that said the worlds of Islam. Your first question was asking you to give me an example and explain something from the worlds of Islam in time period 1. All I do is take blue headlines whenever possible and turn them into questions. That's it. Anything in that section that is a specific example, you can write about as long as you explain its importance. I am teaching a new class this year called AP Research. My students at the end of the year will produce a 20-page research project and do a 20-minute presentation on it, which is a pretty high-level stuff for high school. So right now we're in the process of figuring out our topics. What do I want to research? And so the number 1 question I'm asking them as they give me ideas, so what? Who's going to care? How will this impact society? How will it impact 20 people? If nobody cares, then it's not a good research project. Why is this information important that you're writing about? What is its significance? How does it help explain the lives of hundreds of millions of people at this time? And if there's none of that, then it's not a good answer. So it needs to be the right time period. On occasion, your textbook will give you a little bit of background. That should not be in your answer. The question says time period 1. So 1200 to 1450. So there are 2 green headlines in that section: the Islamic heartland and cultural encounters in India and Spain. They give you multiple examples of that: India, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, Seljuk Turks, Abbasid Caliphate. That's 5 examples they give you. You pick any one of those 5, you tell me a little bit about it, and you explain why it matters. That's what you do. That's your answer. Comma, because. Okay, on page 69, there's a headline that says the worlds of Christendom, which was your second question. When I say explain an aspect of, explain part of it. You had 2 blue headlines or 2 green headlines again. The Byzantines and Western Europe, just like we did in class on Wednesday. That's it. Pick one. Tell me what's happening. Why is it important? That's all reading quizzes are. Right now, they're incredibly easy because you can have your notebook out literally right next to you, copying down something you wrote. As you can imagine, when we come back in person, they get harder because you have to remember. And you guys be in 6th period, you may have trouble remembering. You could have done your homework and by 6th period the next day, not going to deny it's harder at the end of the day. But then you look at your notes over lunch when you know we have a reading quiz coming, that kind of thing. I don't know what else to tell you. So it's going to get harder. So build up a bank of good grades right now. So if you struggle a little bit when we do come back in person, you have enough points that it's not going to make a difference. You'll still keep your A. And that's what I'd like you to do. Does everybody understand me? Does that make sense? Any reading quiz questions? So if you have not done reading quiz 4, it should be already turned in. If you wanted to wait to hear me explain it or look at this sample, that's fine, but I expect it in the next day or 2. Since I've caught up on grades, I'm going to keep up with them. So I'm going to be sending out missing stuff because the 6 weeks ends next week on the 6th of October. So it's a week and a half, but it ends soon. So if I need to send home messages, I'm going to about what's going on. Also looking at the calendar, next week we go back to 4 days because we are not in school next Friday, a week from today. It is our fall break. So next Friday and the following Monday. So you get 4 days off consecutively. So next week I will see you on Tuesday and Thursday. So please make sure you look at your calendars and note that. I'm sure most of you already have, but some of us struggle with, every time we've had a different schedule, I've had kids show up at the wrong class. Look at your schedule, put it in your phone. All right, I'm done with that. Next, I would like to talk about the practice multiple choice. I'm going to give you the answer key. You should write this down or type it up. So if you will get the ability to follow along, we will discuss the multiple choice. I only graded this that you did it. I did not grade it for accuracy because it was practice. That's the point of practice. So may I begin? You ready? So questions 1 through 4 were about Hammurabi's law code from ancient Mesopotamia. One of the first major law codes in the world, an eye for an eye, that kind of stuff. Number 1, asked you about how would this law code give us evidence of early states and what they were like. The answer is C. 1 is C. Early legal systems reflect existing social hierarchies. All right, 2, the answer is D. The unification of states through law. Common law brings us together. Number 3, shocking answer, A, patriarchy. All these ancient civilizations were patriarchal. They just were. And many societies after that were patriarchal as well. Some, quite a few today, still patriarchal, if not all of them. 4, D, the development of record keeping is an important part of the creation and growth of civilization. How do we know what the rules are? How do we know who owns what? How do we pass on our history and culture? Written record keeping. Okay, number 5 through 7 is a religious text from Hinduism. So the answer to 5 is B, Hinduism. The Vedas are some of the oldest Hindu texts. And so when you see the adjective Vedic, that just means being of the Vedas, refers to Hinduism and its early beginnings. All right, 6 is B. If you look at B, it says the multiple forms of Brahma. We didn't talk about that. You may not know what that means, but it says, and reincarnation. You should all know what reincarnation is. And the text talks about multiple lives and your soul moving between one body and the next. That is reincarnation. So as you can see, the questions are a mixture of analyze the stuff you see and your knowledge of the topic. It's a mixture of those two concepts. 7 is D, the caste system. The development of Hinduism is historically tied to the development of the caste system, which we talked about. How do I know what my dharma is, my moral duty in Hinduism? My caste historically tells me that. All right, questions 8 through 10. It shows a statue of the Buddha. No explanation. It just says it's from China and it's a statue of the Buddha. So if you look at 8, they all reference Buddhism. So typically kids have a hard time with number 8, but 8 is A, because all you're doing is whatever the visual tells you. It just says, here's a statue of Buddha in China. B mentions Japan. We have no knowledge of Japan with this source. We don't. C mentions it overtakes Confucianism. We don't know that. It's just a statue. We can't know that. D, it talks about India, South Asia. We can't know that either, because again, maybe this Buddha statue came to China from somewhere else besides India. We don't know. So A is going to be the best answer because it just talks about Buddhism spreading into China. And we know that happened because we see a Buddha statue in China, and we know the Chinese didn't create Buddhism. So the answer is A. 9, the answer is C. Okay, art to reflect religious values. For example, if I were to walk into a Christian church, what kind of art might I expect to see somewhere in that building?
Stuff about Christ.
Yeah, so like a crucifixion scene, a painting of Jesus, you know, one of those kind of things. Yeah, that'd be your expectation. All right. Number 10, A, Vedic, again, is an adjective meaning of Hinduism, the earliest text of Hinduism. If you missed that one, that's okay. I can understand why you wouldn't. But you could probably guess it because there's no known evidence of Buddha having any influence from China. So Confucianism, Taoism are out. And D, ancestor veneration. The word veneration means to worship. If you venerate something, you worship it, which is what we also did in China. So the only answer relating to India is A. All right, second to last, questions 11 through 13, passages from the Analects. The Analects are the collected sayings of Confucianism. When they say the master, that refers to Confucius. So the answer to 11 is A, Confucianism. B, filial piety. That is respecting your elders. It's a fancy way of saying to respect your elders. That is in your study guide. You should know that phrase. Filial piety means to respect one's elders. 13, once again, the answer is B, patriarchy. Confucianism, like all the belief systems of this time, values men over women. And then 14 and 15, a picture of a Greek temple from Athens, named after the goddess Athena. Athena, the patron goddess of Athens, henceforth the same name. She is the goddess of wisdom. All right. So 14, we have C, ancient cities promote religious practice. Remember that rulers use a common religion to support their rule. The gods support me. God supports me. We're all the same religion. We're probably going to believe that and then believe that our rulers are divinely inspired and we should support them. And then 15 is going to be C, early civilizations built big buildings for religious, for government purposes, whatever. So those are your multiple choice. Now, briefly.
Can you repeat 15 again?
Yes, C. If anybody wants to type those in the chat, you're welcome to. I don't know if anybody's having audio difficulties, but if anybody wants to be nice and type them in the chat, that's fine. Okay? Mr. Rich, why didn't you type them for us? Because, and this didn't happen for your class because you're all here, I'm tired of giving out stuff to people that don't show up for class and don't explain what happened, so I'm not posting the answer key on Classroom. If people want it and they didn't come to class, they're going to have to ask me for it or ask one of their classmates. At least make some level of effort. But you all are doing a great job, but I've got people that are not showing up and then expect me to help them and then never tell me what's going on. That's not okay. If you miss work, at some point you got to tell your boss what's going on or they're going to assume you're lying about it. So it's just common courtesy to keep people informed so we can try to help and we can understand if there's a reason why something isn't happening, as opposed to just guessing that you're making excuses. All right. So what makes a good score? Well, it depends. The AP test will tell you flat out they don't curve. I'm going to tell you right now they do. They do. Because if 80% of you pass the AP test, colleges are going to be mad. Because that's a lot of money they're not getting for tuition that they're giving to you for a scholarship because you passed an AP exam. And right now, do colleges need money? Yeah. I have several friends in higher education, and what I've discovered that I didn't know is at many colleges, all it takes is one semester, in some cases two, of people not paying tuition or not paying room and board, and those colleges might close. One of my best friends became a college president at the age of 39. His goal was to be 40-year-old president, and he made it by 3 months. And he was so excited, and he became the president of that university in January of this year. And in March, COVID hit, and he's had to lay off 1/4 of their workforce, and he's afraid if they have to go into spring with nobody, they closed campus in the fall, everything's online, because they're in a state with more severe restrictions in Kentucky. So their standards are even higher, and ours are pretty good, but theirs are even stricter. And he said, if we don't have students on campus in January, we're probably going to have to close. And this university's been open for 150 years. Which I hate for my friend, but, you know, life sucks sometimes. It's just the way it goes. And it's not his fault. I mean, how could he have predicted this? It's just he's at a small school with not a lot of extra money. So my point is this. The College Board ain't going to have an 80% pass rate in AP World. So if the test is too easy and many more of you pass it than normal, they will curve it so less of you pass it. If nobody passes, you're going to be mad. I'm going to be mad. Your parents are going to be mad. And then people are going to stop paying $85 for an AP test. So they got to find that balance, which means they curve it. And they'll tell you they won't. They're lying. So our job to beat the curve is like being a surfer. There's a big old wave right behind you, and all it takes is one mistake, and the wave crushes you. Or you can ride it out, and you look cool doing it, and you ride into the surf, and people are like, cool, yeah, that's our goal. So we're just going to try to ride ahead of the curve. You don't have to be great. You just have to be average or better than average. If you're average, you'll pass. What we don't want is below average. So I'm sorry if other people suck. I'm sorry if other people aren't prepared. There are teachers that don't teach the document-based question because they don't like it or they think it's hard, and that's it. We're going to learn that. So you're going to have an advantage over those people. We just have to be average or a little better than average. That's all we got to do. And so that is our plan. Okay? As Ethan is saying, yes, Mr. McDonald's saying you don't have to run the bear, just outrun your friend running away from the bear. That is true. Absolutely true. And you'll feel sorry, but you're also going to be glad that you made it. And so that's what we got to do. So typically what I will do is I just divide it up mathematically. A 5 is really hard to get, so I make a 5 really hard to get. To get a 3, typically, you need to be somewhere in these, you need to get about 60% of the questions right. So for this one, that's going to be about 9. It's going to be 9. If you got 9 or more, that would be considered a passing score. Now, on the real AP test with a curve, that number's probably 6 or 7. So understand right now, Mr. Rich will never curve. Let me look at you real close. I know you don't want to see this face that close, but it is what it is. No curve, ever from me. So if you can get to where you're getting 3s and 4s on this multiple choice with no curve and my questions are longer and harder because they are, guess what's going to happen when you have a curve and the questions are easier and the passages are shorter? You're going to do better. I have kids every year. The best test they ever have is the AP test. They beat their class average all year long. That's what I want. I want you to walk out of the gym in May going, that was easy. I may have told you this story, but a couple years ago, we walked out of the test, and I happened to be going to the bathroom, and the kids were literally coming out of the gym. And so, of course, they see me, and they go, "Arr!" I had a girl come up and playfully, but somewhat seriously, punch me in the arm. Kind of hard. I'm like, what was that for? She goes, your tests were so much harder, and I had to do this all year long. I said, yeah, but you know what that means? That means you probably passed, and you passed easily. She went, oh, okay. She said, by the way, I probably shouldn't have hit you. That's bad. I'm sorry. It's like, it's okay. I said, you're not going to hurt me. I'm a big dude. It's fine. I said, now, if you do it again, that's not a big, and it was playful. So it was cool. She didn't like actually try to hit me, but it was kind of funny. And I laughed. So, I mean, that kind of stuff's funny, but she was like, I said, you want the game to be your best performance. You don't want to leave your best performance in practice because nobody's giving trophies in practice. Right? So understand, if you're sitting there right now going, oh, I only got 4 out of 15. It's your first practice. Who cares? I joined the cross-country team the first week of my sophomore year of high school. Didn't run all summer because my parents said, you need to get involved. I was like, well, I'll go run cross-country. We had a race 5 days later in August, 105 degrees. Hilliest course we ran all year. I literally, this is a true story. I crossed the finish line, so at least I finished. My time was awful. And then my coach's wife she would always like catch us if we were, struggling. I like collapsed into my coach's wife's arms and vomited all over her. Poor woman. Because I was not ready for that. By the end of the year, I knocked 7 minutes off my time. Because it's amazing how much better of a runner you are when you actually run. Huh, who knew? So that tells you, A, my first time was terrible. But by the end of the year, I was pretty competitive. And the next year I was on varsity. So like I actually stepped up and got better because I actually practiced the skill. We're going to practice the skill. You're going to do this over and over and annoyingly so over again. But by May, you will be ready. I love in April when we're reviewing and I'm saying something and I see some of you all mouthing my phrases. You know what I'm going to say before I say it because you are so ready. You got this. Because I repeat myself a lot. That's what I want you to be. That's where I want you to be at. Is you're ready. Okay? So if you didn't do so hot this time, don't worry. You're going to get better through practice. And let's say the second time is not very good either, and you're nervous, and you and I can meet, and I can give you some strategies on maybe how to approach multiple choice differently. But for right now, I just want you to figure it out on your own and do your best. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Moving on. Let's talk about the short answer y'all did. You had two. The first one was about agriculture, shockingly. The second one, you picked one of two. So again, if you need to unsubmit your short answer from Classroom, I've already given you a grade for it, so it's fine. I would love you to type in extra information in your Google Doc, if possible. If you don't have that capacity, write it down, because I'm going to give you some advice on how to make this better. Okay? So if you need to unsubmit it for me, feel free. Or if you want to type it in a new Google Doc, do that. Or if you need to handwrite it, do that. I don't care. So short answers, I think of the 4 parts of the AP test are the easiest. Once you get good at it, the questions are always big picture. You are never going to see a short answer and go, I've never heard of that. It's not going to happen. My worst student will know enough to do well on short answers. Promise you. Even if you never open the textbook at all. Because they're big picture main ideas we will talk about in class. Promise. All right? So you look at this, you go, oh my gosh, I know this. Because the first source is Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond, again. Sick of that dude. You read his article. We've already written one short answer about it. We talked about it in class. Agriculture is the worst mistake, he says. We already know that. You don't have to read it. You know. So what would you expect the second source would say before you even read it? What would logic tell you that second source would say about agriculture since Jared Diamond says it's awful?
That it's not awful.
Yeah, because if we had the same opinion twice, how are we going to argue? So you can expect if there are two sources, they will be opposed to each other. Does that make sense? So if you read it and go, these two sources say the same thing, read them again. Because otherwise, how do you argue that? So let's look at the answers again. If you have any comments, please do. If you have any questions, ask. But add to your information if you see that you're missing something. We have 3 components for each one. Claim, evidence, explain. I had an extra finger up there, sorry. Claim, evidence, explain. It's hard to count to 3 on a Friday. So, identify and explain one piece of historical evidence that supports Jared Diamond's interpretation about the Neolithic Revolution. So first thing, what is his interpretation? That's our claim. And of course, we already know that because we've talked about it 10 times. It is agriculture is awful. It's horrible. It's the worst mistake we've ever done. If you want to connect to the source, which you want to, feel free to paraphrase a word or two or straight up copy a word or two and put in quotes. If there was one word you were going to steal out of that short quote in source 1, what would it be to summarize Jared Diamond's interpretation? If you have the source in front of you, what is that one word that might sum it up?
Catastrophe.
Yeah, what's that mean, Dakota?
Like something goes really bad.
Yeah, like awful, like oh my gosh. So catastrophe and worst kind of mean the same thing. So in source 1, Jared Diamond asserts that agriculture is a catastrophe for humans. That's your claim. Your evidence from your knowledge, and you have plenty of examples. Can someone give me one example? Dakota, I appreciate your support, but let's have somebody else who is feeling awake on a Friday. What is another example of specific evidence that would support that agriculture is terrible?
Malnutrition or health.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yep, Charlie, that's great. Now explain that to us, because how does agriculture cause malnutrition, according to him?
Because of their lack of variety within their whatever they were planting. If one thing went bad, basically they just lost all their food for whatever season or year, however long.
Okay. Now that you're actually conflating two answers there, that would be the like they lose it, but malnutrition would be more like they don't have variety. So they don't hunt as much, they don't get protein, they're not getting enough fat. If any of you have decided to become a vegetarian, that is something you have to educate yourself on, is how do I get enough of those variety of nutrients while still eating a plant-based diet? So you have to explain the significance of that. Why is that bad? Why does that matter? Why is it a catastrophe? And so if people don't eat well long-term, what will happen to people? They will die. What happens if a lot of people die in a civilization? What will happen to the civilization?
Go extinct.
Yeah, it will also die. Yes. So this is not good for long-term human individual or collective health. That is your argument. Claim, evidence, explain. Do you provide that in your answer, including a reference to the source? For many of you, you don't reference the source when you start doing these. Reference the source. Say the worst mistake. Say catastrophe. Connect to the source somehow. Otherwise, why do we have the source? Use it. Now, don't quote the whole thing, but quote a word or two. Does that make sense? Okay. Second source. My dude's like, it's great. He says the word I would focus on is stupendous. Do we know what it means if something is stupendous?
It's like really good. It's like amazing.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Mr. Rich of words, okay? So that's how it is. So it's really awesome. What is an example of evidence that would support that agriculture benefits humanity?
New technology.
Explain.
Well, life got easier because like the invention of wheels, so we can like transport things easier from place to place.
Okay, but how is that related to agriculture? Because you didn't connect it to agriculture at all.
It's easier to farm now that you can like take crops from like an area to another area.
But that's an effect. That's not, I mean, that's not an effect. That's not a cause. So in other words, how does agriculture cause that to happen?
Because they can farm, they don't have to worry about wandering around for food, so they can do more to concentrate on everything else like art and science and learning and building and all that.
Thank you, Amanda. That would be our traits of civilization. And what I told you, I believe the most important trait was non-food producing jobs. We have enough food that not everyone has to farm, which allows us to do all the other things of civilization, which Amanda just referenced a few of them. Does that make sense? So we can make wheels and carts and stuff, but we have to have enough food to feed those engineers and inventors. Because a wheel's cool, but you can't eat it unless it's a wheel of cheese or something. So it's not going to help you survive. Does that make sense? Any questions about A or B? This is a pretty simple one. C is an opinion. Do you think A is right or B is right? As long as you give specific evidence, you can't be wrong. Yay, history. It doesn't matter which answer you give as long as you say why you believe it. I would believe B better, but you have to give a different, you can't just repeat what you said in B, you have to give a different reason. So if you talk about inventions and culture and all that stuff, great.
If you don't think agriculture was the worst mistake, then what do you think it is?
Anything else would be, then it's, you're not saying what you think, it's whether you think A or B is right. So it's not, the answer is not available.
I know, I was just curious.
If I don't think, what the worst mistake is? Oh, in human history, is that what you're asking? Whew, we've got a lot of them. I mean, right now in our society, we are seeing the long-term effects of systemic injustice. We're seeing the impact it has on minority groups, especially Black people in America, and the long-standing, racial inequalities that have existed in our society and the impact it's having on people. And some of us have been able to live most of our lives, if not all of our lives, and I'm certainly guilty of that, without really truly understanding the suffering other people have to endure, because I am a middle-aged white guy. I'm about as privileged as it gets. I mean, nobody ever questions me on anything. I do what I want pretty much in any situation. Have I ever been pulled over by a police officer and talked my way out of a speeding ticket? Yes, I have. Have I ever been followed in a store? No, I haven't. So those are things I don't understand because it's never happened to me. And so I think many of us are starting to learn how difficult some people in this country have had it, not by most people's intention. I think the key to a lot of understanding this, which is difficult, is it's not something that our generation has done. It's been around for a long time, and we have to deal with the repercussions of it. And so I want to be somebody who's a supporter and tries to help in any way I can, and not be continuing that so that someday your generation's grandchildren don't have to deal with this as much as people do alive today. And that's my hope. And that's what I hope we can all try to achieve, is be part of a solution of more equality for all of us, instead of systems where people are discriminated against because of where they come from, or their ethnic or racial background. And I hope that's something that we can all support and we can all do our best to work toward. And it's not easy, but I think that's an example. I would say nuclear war, that's not good. Exploitation of the poor and in imperialism. There's a lot of good answers for what's bad. Sexism. I mean, there's a lot of things that humanity has done that's not good.
What about money?
What about money? Well, I think that's poverty. So yeah, there's definitely, the rich have exploited the poor. That's part of it. So anyway, without getting into
just like the invention of money. I think that would be a bad mistake.
Amanda, we need to move on. So I appreciate the concept, but we'll go off on a
Sorry.
tangent. No, you're okay. It's fine. Things to think about. Yeah, money is an interesting concept, that's for sure. So anyway, as I was saying, C is your answer as long as you choose to support it with some sort of evidence. So do you think it's the worst or it's best? If you think, well, it's in the middle, that's not a choice. You have to answer the question. It's really good or it's really bad, which one and why? And you can't have the same answer as a previous part of the question. So you can't answer B and C the same with the same evidence. Let me say that again. You can't answer multiple parts of the same question with the same evidence and have that count. Can't do it. Okay? Now, on the back, or page 2, if you're looking digitally, you had 2 questions. You're picking one. There is no source to look at or see. And that is a source of comparing and contrasting 2 religions and then 2 philosophies. So it doesn't matter which one you picked. A asked you for 1. Notice I capitalized it. B asked you for 2. Notice I capitalized it. And then I looked, and several of you for B only put 1. Read the questions carefully. The most important part of any question is the first 10, 15 seconds when you read it. If you read it correctly, you have a much higher chance, oddly enough, of answering it correctly than if you read it incorrectly. And there's nothing worse than realizing 20 minutes later, oh my gosh, I answered the wrong thing. Because then you're running out of time. And in this case, you're running out of space. You get 1 page per answer, 3 paragraphs. If you have to scratch out the whole first paragraph, you don't get extra space. You got to squeeze the other answers in. So you want to be sure before you get started writing. So I'm not going to go over the answers. I'm just going to give you one example.
Erase it though?
What? You have to use pen on the AP test, blue or black pen. I had kids before with whiteout. I'm like, you don't have time to use whiteout. Takes forever. Got to shake it and all that stuff. Plus they're like sniffing it or something when it's not good. So got to get after it. Well, Mr. Rich, that's why I have you pre-write. If you pre-write, you know what you're doing before you get started, and you're less likely to make a big mistake. You think about it. You process it. When you just start writing, you haven't thought. So that's why I ask you to pre-write. Now, I'll give you one example of what this looks like. For 2A, if you were doing 2A, Confucianism, Taoism, something similar, a bad answer is they both come from China. There's no evidence. There's no explanation. Let me provide you with some of that. Both the philosophies of Confucianism and Taoism come from China at around the same time. Both of their founders are living in a time of civil war and chaos in China. People are struggling to survive. They're worried about violence affecting their families, whatever. Therefore, both of these philosophies, albeit in different ways, promote structure, promote rules, promote order. Taoism is much more flexible than Confucianism, but Taoism still says your way of nature can't be to hurt other people. If your favorite thing to do, as I told you in class, is to punch people in the face, you can't do that because it's going to hurt people, even though you like it. So both of them promote a respect for other people. That's an explanation. If you just wrote, they're both from China, so what? Any questions on that? I would have picked for this one Hinduism and Buddhism because they're very easy, especially to contrast. So that would have been the one I picked, but as long as you gave answers and explained them, that's fine. So if you look at your schedule, I've given you an assignment that's due next Tuesday. In your textbook at the end of the chapter, because we're finished with chapter 2 as of this weekend, you have a short set of questions. There are 5 multiple choice on pages 105. 5. Won't take you very long. On the next page, when you flip, there are 3 short answers. I'm asking you to pick one. Pick one. Which one? I don't care. Type this up in a Google Doc. Upload it by Tuesday. This is a participation credit. I will grade your short answer. I'll tell you what you would have gotten, but you're going to get 2 points if you turn them in and you try. So please do not cheat. Do not talk to your friend. Do not copy and paste their answer because it's Tuesday morning and you forgot. But a short answer takes you 15 minutes. So with 5 multiple choice and 1 short answer, we're looking at about a 20-minute assignment. My recommendation, no notes, no friends, no help, just your brain, do the best you can. And if you stink it up, that tells you what you need to work on in the future. If you lie to yourself and say, I did a great job, but you cheated, there are kids every year that crush like practice tests and then do poorly in the AP test. Now, that could be because the AP test, they got stressed out and they knew it was real and they just had a adverse reaction. Or it could be they cheated on the practice test. And then the real test, they didn't do that, and then we saw the real them. Don't cheat on stuff where you're getting credit. It doesn't make any sense. Be honest. I promise you, if you turn work in and try hard, you're going to get an A. The worst is a B. You turn your assignments in, the worst you're getting is a B. I promise you. I set it up that way. So why cheat? Because if you learn now what you're not good at, you'll get better and you'll be ready in May. If you cheat all year long and copy and do it, you're never going to be ready, and then in May is going to be ugly. So take your lumps now, learn what you need to work on it, and then you'll be better. What a crazy concept. Okay? Y'all can do this. Just be smart about it. Stop worrying about your grades. Worry about learning. If you worry about learning, your grades will be fine. Because in the long run, what's more valuable to you? 1A or passing a test that can save you thousands of dollars in college on tuition? I think I know the answer, but that's up to you. So that assignment is posted. It is due before we have class on Tuesday. It should take you no more than 20 minutes. Put it in a Google Doc, label it with your name, and turn it in to me, please. Any questions? And that's one of those we're going to go over.
So does that mean the more AP classes I take and the more AP tests I pass, the more money I can save?
Yes.
Because I passed the AP test for AP Human Geography.
Yes,
that's literally. That means I saved a lot of money, and if I pass this one, I save even more.
And if you pass more than maybe, yeah, that's how that works. So, and there's a website on the College Board that shows you different universities and how much credit they give for what score on what test. And you can actually see that as you're making your college decisions, and that might influence where you go because you'll get more out of this credit at this institution, which means you save more money. So yes, that is absolutely true. All right, last thing we're going to do today. Last class, so on Tuesday, I gave you all some documents which had some visuals about the Islamic world. And I gave you a few minutes to talk about them. So what I want to do is pull that up. I want to talk about them, and you guys help me talk about them for a few minutes. And then let's see how we can use visuals to answer questions in short answers in essays. How do I take a bit? Because the writing, you've been looking at writing and interpreting it since you started reading books when you were a little kid. Like that's what you do in school in English, right? You read books, you think about it, you analyze it, you write about it. The visual, sometimes my students have a harder time because most of you don't have as much experience with this. So we're going to practice, how do I analyze a visual? So that's what this was about. So let me pull it up. We've got about 13 minutes, so we'll get through either the first 2 or 3. We won't finish them all, but we'll get through enough of them. There we go. There's the right screen. And what this prompt said, explain the effects of intellectual innovation in Dar al-Islam, the Muslim world, Dar al-Islam. What does it mean to have innovation or to be an innovator?
You come up with new things like technology or ideas.
Yeah, great answer. Yes. That's okay. Sometimes we talk over each other. It's all good. So new ideas, creativity, all that good stuff. So let's look. Sorry? I think you forgot to mute yourself, Simone. Whoop, whoop. I did it for you. So Doc 1 looks at architecture, the process of making buildings. So on the left, we see a mosque. What is the purpose of a mosque?
To pray.
Yeah, it's a house of worship for Muslims. On the right, we see a picture of a palace. What's the purpose of a palace?
To show off and like live in.
Okay, well in theory, it's to live in. Who lives there?
Rulers.
It's a flex.
Royalty, yeah. It's a flex, definitely. So, but what's our innovation? All right. So clearly we have like columns on the left to hold up the ceiling, the roof. We see columns on the right. On the left, we see beautifully painted decorative patterns. We see, if you look at the top of the columns, you see decorative forms there. You see fancy like sculpture on the columns as they go up. Do we need any of that decoration to pray in this building? No, but it makes it more beautiful. And in theory, making things more beautiful means more people will use them. So we come up with ways. Also, when you look on the left, that's indoors. Does that look like a place with a lot of light in it? Can you see pretty well in there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that difficult in a time before electric light? Yes. So as we get better at building, we are able to let more light in, which means more people may actually use the facility. So as we get better at building, we can have windows and open spaces to bring in more natural light, which we needed because otherwise we're burning candles all the time. On the right, that is a courtyard. In the middle, I don't know if you can tell what that is, but that is a fountain. And that fountain is surrounded by sculptures of lions. It's called the Courtyard of the Lions. The Alhambra in Spain, one of the places I'd wanted to visit for most of my life, and I finally got to go there a couple years ago. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay? Why lions in a palace? What's the symbolism there?
King of the jungle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
they're called King of the Jungle.
so I'm a
It's
strong,
whatever.
powerful ruler. Yeah, I'm a powerful king. But again, look at all that decoration. Look at all those pyramidal structures on top where the roof is. None of those things are necessary. But they're creative because they look pleasing to the eye, they catch your attention, and especially if you're a foreign visitor to a palace. That king, as Amanda said a few minutes ago, wants to flex. That king wants you to know that look at all the money I have, look at the beautiful house I live in, imagine how much money I could spend on my soldiers and their weapons. Because if I can afford to live in a place like this, imagine what I can bring to you on a battlefield. Ooh. Okay? So we use architecture and new creations and new styles to build fancier, more beautiful, more light, all of which to showcase our power and wealth even more. Does that make sense? Now, document 2, I think, is easier because we're looking at innovation, creativity, new ideas. Document 2, we have a short paragraph and we have a visual. What is that visual? It says it in the document description. What is it?
Like instructions.
For what?
Medical schools, so surgery.
Yeah, it's how to do surgery and what tools to use. And it says it's from a 30-volume encyclopedia on medical practices. And then he explains in that paragraph about different parts of the body. Anatomy is the physical structure of the human body. Physiology is how it works, how it moves. Okay? So like anatomy is, the nervous system is made up of nerve cells, which consist of axons, dendrites, synapses, etc. Physiology is when you send a message through your nervous system, electrical signals fire, they cross the synapse with neurotransmitters, blah, blah, all that stuff. So who's looking at this source back 1,000 years ago?
Doctors.
Doctors, and potentially doctors that are being trained to be future doctors. Which I think I heard you say this earlier, Amanda. This is a version of what we would call medical school. This is a medical textbook. The average person is not going to read a book on surgical inventions. What are they going to do with that knowledge? Nothing. Okay? No one in this room right now could go be a surgeon today. Now, some of you may be a surgeon in 15 years, but you ain't going to be one today. Doesn't mean you're not smart enough. You're plenty smart enough. It's what do you not have right now to be a surgeon? Training, experience, etc. So this shows evidence of medical school, of training people to be doctors based on scientific practice. Is that new at this time period 1,000 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll give you a hint. In the European world at this time, they thought the body was filled with 4 liquids, and you got sick because you had too much of one of the liquids. Black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. And since the only one they could control was blood, they would cut you open and bleed you or put a leech on you to suck out some of your blood, and they thought that would make you healthier. Why do barber poles have red in them around the outside? Because your barber was also your doctor, because they had sharp tools to cut your hair. They also had sharp tools to cut your skin to bleed you to make you healthier. George Washington, first American president, died in 1799. He was sick. He wasn't feeling well. His doctors came to visit him. They bled him to death. Of course, not on purpose, but that was 200 years ago, barely more than that they were still believing this practice. The Islamic world is doing surgical techniques 1,000 years ago. When I tell you that the Islamic societies are right up there with China and time period 1 is the greatest, that's what I'm talking about. The European medical knowledge was non-existent at that time. I'm going to bleed you and that's going to make you better, bruh. Come on. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, let's look at one more and then we'll finish. So illustrations. You see what they're doing. The guy on the left looks like he's painting the tree. I don't think that's what he's actually doing. And the guy on the right, what does it look like he's doing?
Planting something.
Digging up dirt.
Yeah, he's planting something, okay? And then you see the description. Raising animals, plants, manure, diseases, etc. Anybody know what we call that today? The science of plants? Ooh, it's botany. B-O-T-A-N-Y. If you go to a nursery, Frank Oddie or one of those places, and you're like, I want some new plants. I just moved to a new house. We're going to put some plants in our front yard. Okay. Are they going to ask you some questions? What kind of things might you need to know if you're going to give somebody advice on what plants to plant?
Where they live,
What do you mean by that?
like climate and stuff.
Okay. How much sunlight do they get? How
How
much
much
rain do you
space
get?
they have?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm assuming that if you're going to a nursery, you're going to the nursery in the town you live in, because it'd be weird to drive like 5 hours to go get plants. But I guess that could happen. But like, what's the climate like? What's the sunlight like? All those kind of things. That's what we call botany. They started working with this, as you can see from these illustrations, about 1,000 years ago. That's another example of creativity in science, because it could allow us to have better food production. It could also allow us just to have more decorative things. One of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life, I just mentioned the Alhambra. In the courtyard there, they have a beautiful garden. And they've tried to plant bushes and plants and things today that are the same things that were planted there 1,000 years ago. In fact, I don't know if any of you ever watched Game of Thrones, it might have been a little too much for you guys. You're probably a little too young for it maybe. But there's a scene in there where they're in like a tropical climate and they walk through gardens a lot. It's called Dorne, They actually filmed the scenes of Dorne in this palace in Spain that I just showed you pictures of on the outside. So they get to visit there. So it's a just stupendously beautiful place. But they learned how to plant trees and how to take care of them and plants and bushes and all that kind of stuff. That's another example of creativity, okay, of innovation, of new ideas. So the Islamic world in period 1 and just before it sees a great period of intellectual growth, new ideas, and not just one field. We have architecture, we have medicine, and we have botany. That's 3 different areas that they were showing improvements and new techniques in. That's an example of innovation. So you take the visual and you describe it to answer your question. And that tends for most of us to be harder than doing so with writing sources. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions for me about that? So we're going to periodically for the rest of the year look at some visuals, and you're all going to get together in small groups and talk about it and say, hey, what does this tell us about this place? How could I use this to explain what's happening in this culture, this society, this empire at this time? Because if you can do that, you're going to do very well on the AP test with your short answers, with your document-based question, and multiple choice has that as well. So that will really help you do a better job of explaining those visuals to understand what's going on. All right? Any questions on that?